You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Are you feeling overwhelmed this time of year? Do you have small group referrals literally coming out of your ears? I totally know the feeling. That's why I've made for you a 4-part video series of my brand new training called Not So Scary Small Groups. So in all things spooky and scary this time of year, small groups don't have to be one of them. It's amazing. I'm going to be showing you how you can engage your students and effectively track your program's progress. And the best part is it's absolutely free. Not only that, for joining the video series, you also get a free small group and a PD certificate of attendance. So go ahead and sign up at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/training to get started. The first video drops on Monday. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So remember, October is Bullying Prevention Month, and this month, instead of focusing on like explicit bullying prevention lessons, I want to focus on those bullying prevention adjacent lessons, things like conflict resolution, things like friendship, things like kindness, and how by teaching these things, we're in turn preventing bullying. So this week, I want to talk to you guys all about friendship. So I'm going to give you some ideas of how you can teach friendship at your school, starting at the school-wide level, then class lessons, small groups, and individual. So let's start by talking about that school-wide level. So one thing I love to do is a buddy bench. So this is more at the elementary level, but it's super cool. Basically, you just get, you could use a bench you already have at your school, like at the recess area, and label it the buddy bench. Or we got one of those like foldable, kind of like a camper chair, like a soccer bench, I think they call them. And we called it the buddy bench. And I actually had one of my small groups help me like decorate it. And it was the buddy bench, and we would set it out at recess every day. And if someone felt like they didn't have anyone to play with, or if they were just feeling kind of lonely, they would go sit on the buddy bench. And then kids, if they saw someone sitting on the buddy bench, would go sit with them. Now, I was terrified because I was like, oh my gosh, someone's going to sit on the buddy bench, and then no one's going to come, and it's going to be horrible. But that never happened. The kids totally surprised me. They would always go to the buddy bench. Now, of course, sometimes the kids just thought it was cool to sit at the buddy bench, and they would just sit there even if they weren't lonely. But they're still being buddies with each other. So it's just kind of a fun friendship thing you can do. But it was really cool to see it work, and the kids were actually super into it. So that's something really simple you can do. If you don't want to buy a bench and you don't already have one, you could do like a buddy rock or buddy corner. I don't know. You can totally do this free. But, I like the alliteration of a buddy bench. It was nice. Our character ed program had like some funding, so I used that money to buy the bench. And like I said, it was just a really cool way to see the kids actually use it for its intended purpose. I was pleasantly surprised. Another thing you can do is like a mix it up at lunch day. So this is perfect for maybe the middle school level. I know sometimes at elementary they're still sitting with their assigned classes at lunch. But if they have self-seating at lunch, a lot of times the lunchroom is a cause of anxiety for a lot of students. They're like, oh, where am I going to sit? I always sit by myself. I only have one friend, and there's this other group I want to sit with. And kids kind of, stick in their own areas. It also reminds me of church. If you go to a church consistently, you'll see like people sit in the same pews like every time. It's kind of cliquey, kind of like the lunchroom. So it's kind of nice to mix it up. So you can have a mix it up day, and that's where they're not supposed to sit by people that they usually sit with. So they'll go sit with other people. There's a lot of good stuff on the internet if you Google this, some good ideas of how to do it as well. And then assigned recess groups are even an option. So sometimes at recess, anytime there's unstructured play, you'll find the same thing happening. Kids are clicking up, kids are getting left out. And as the counselor, you probably get referrals all the time, or kids come into your office saying like, they left me out, or they don't want to play with me. And a lot of times those are the sources of these friendship problems. So you could try doing once a week assigned recess groups where you like make the kids play with kids they wouldn't normally play with. You don't have to tell them that, but you're like, we're just going to form groups and have these new groups on Tuesdays. We're going to play with these groups. So that's kind of a cool idea. The kids may hate it at first, but I think it would be super rewarding in the end. So those are some ideas at the school-wide level. Now let's talk about the class level. So as you're doing your class lessons, you can totally go in and do a class lesson on friendship. Now, for a friendship class lesson, you want kids to discuss the qualities of a good friend versus the qualities of a bad friend. So you want to make sure they know. A lot of times we assume kids know, like, well, hello, it's obvious what a good friend is. a good friend's honest, a bad friend would lie, things like that. But kids may not know, and so oftentimes we need to teach this explicitly. You can also do like a feelings check with the class. I love to do these, but you can model that. That's always a great way to start a friendship lesson. And then always I statements, bringing that piece about resolving conflicts, how they can use I statements to resolve those conflicts. And then they can just practice some kindness, so you can have them go around giving each classmates compliments. So maybe they're writing them down on each other's, maybe they write their name on a paper on their desk, and then they're writing nice compliments on the desk. Those are just different ways that they could practice friendship and compliments. You could also show some videos that really demonstrate the qualities of being a good friend versus the qualities of not being a good friend, and have students maybe do a think, pair, share about like why they're a good friend, what areas they want to improve on in their friendship. Those are awesome ideas. Now, in addition to that, you may have some students who need a little more than that class lesson, and they're continuing to struggle, and they could really use a small group or benefit from a small group. So, and I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but how naming your group matters, because I've been, at school before, and they call everything friendship group. They're like, oh, they're in her friendship group. They're in her friendship group. And I'm like, no, they're actually in my social skills group or whatever. So I do think, this is kind of a side tangent, but I do think it's super important as part of advocating for all the services that you provide, that you name the groups actually. You don't let them just call everything a friendship group, because that, kind of devalues what you're doing. You're doing so much more than just friendship groups. You're doing anger management groups, and you're doing anxiety groups, and you're doing self-regulation groups. So by clarifying that, you're, showing all the services that you provide, but then you're also letting people know, like, I offer more than just friendship counseling. Like I said, a little side note, but I'm passionate about that. But in some cases, you actually are doing a friendship group. So here's some ideas for what you can do if you're doing a friendship group with students. So again, I love to have kids start off by talking about the qualities of a good friend. So what makes a good friend, and what doesn't make a good friend, or how do good friends act? Like if you want to find a new friend, what could you do? Ask them to play. That would be great. Introduce them to your other friends. Invite them to hang out. But if you boss them around or ignore them or only talk about yourself, they're not going to want to hang out with you. So I like having kind of some kind of sort for them to do that. And then you can also talk about qualities, like I said. So you could do a dice game with questions kind of like, what's something you look for in a friend? What's easy about being a good friend? How are you a good friend? What do you love about your friend? So if you say, hey, can you guys name qualities of a good friend? That might be challenging. But if you say, what do you love about your friends? Then you can start to make a list on the board, and then they'll get an idea, and they'll say like, oh, these are qualities of a good friend. What annoys you about your friends? Oh, those are maybe people are being bad friends. So just things like that. And then I like to talk about how they can nurture their friendships. So, part of friendship is making friends, so making new friends, but then we have to maintain those friendships. So, using an example of like watering a garden, or like, maintaining a bike with a toolbox, something like that. So talk about how you can maintain those friendships by continuing to be generous and share, give them compliments, keep their promises, make them laugh. Those are all ways. And then I like to talk about in the group, I love I statements. I talked about those in the second episode of this month, talking about conflict resolution. But I love to incorporate I statements into all levels when teaching friendship. So I mentioned it at the class lesson, but I also like to do it at the small group level, because you can have them know that, even if you're in a good friendship, because a lot of times what I'll hear kids say is they'll say like, oh, she did this, we're not friends anymore. And I used to get so annoyed, like, you're still friends, you just had a conflict. Like, if I did that with my friends, I wouldn't have any friends, right? Like, people are going to have conflicts. That's just part of a friendship. So I think that's really important to tell kids that. And a lot of times, I was actually listening to a unrelated podcast, like a completely personal podcast I was listening to. Oh, it was Jen Hatmaker's podcast. That's who it was. I was listening to an episode on the Jen Hatmaker podcast. She was interviewing someone, and they were talking about social media and how today, Gen Zers and everyone, they have so much instant gratification in their lives, mainly due to digital and technology causes. Totally different topic. But due to this instant gratification, a lot of times they give up more easily than older people. So for example, if they're having a hard time in a class, they would just like drop out of the class at like the college level instead of pursuing it. Or, if they're having a tough time in a relationship, they'll just break up with the person instead of continuing it. So it had me thinking about our kiddos and how they definitely, live in a world of instant gratification. And it's kind of like that with their friendships. Like sometimes instead of taking the time to resolve the conflict and figure it out, they're just like, oh, we're not friends anymore. And I've had countless students tell me that, like, well, I'm not her friend anymore. Mainly at the elementary level, before they understand this, but this is the teaching opportunity. So in the small group, you can talk about conflict resolution and how you have to mend your relationships, right? Like, okay, yeah, that your friend hurt you or you hurt your friend. That's a problem. We need to resolve it. You can move past this. So I love to teach I statements in that way. And the cool thing about a small group is you can get kids to share actual scenarios happening in their lives. They can keep the names private, but to share actual scenarios happening in their lives, and then they can work through it together as the group, like helping them come up with I statements so they can then go practice in real life. So you can do some scenario cards like you do in the class lesson, but you can also have them write the scenario cards based on their own experiences, which is something cool that you would do in a group that may not necessarily work at the class lesson level. So those are some ideas for what you could do in a friendship small group. I love doing a friendship small group. It's one of those small groups that's cool because not only are you like teaching them a skill, but they're literally practicing the skill just by being in the group itself. Same with social skills. Like I love to do social skills in a small group because not only are you teaching them social skills, but they're getting to practice social skills by being in the group. Sometimes your group topic may be something like, like self-regulation or something, or anger management. And if they're not getting angry in group, then they're not really practicing it in the group. They're just learning the strategies and then they'll practice it somewhere else. But it's kind of cool when it's friendship or social skills that you're like literally, they're learning the concept and they're practicing it while they're learning it. So it's really cool. And lastly, at the individual level, so this is less common because like I was saying, the whole point of the small group is you're getting to practice it with each other. So it'd be kind of weird to have a friendship group with a friendship session with just one person, right? Like at the individual level. But sometimes this is necessary. You may have those kids who are struggling, socially. Maybe they're like a little socially awkward or they're just having a lot of friendship issues. And you may need to be really explicit with them, using scripts or role play on like how you can be a good friend and social stories, things like that. So you may have some higher need individuals who need this, and that's totally fine. And you do want to offer that as well. But you could help a student with friendship issues at the individual level. And then the goal would be, after you're seeing them at some time there, you would move them down to the group, and then maybe they would thrive in the group setting as well after that. So I hope you guys found this episode helpful, all about how you can teach friendship at the school-wide level, at the class lesson level, small groups and individuals. Talking about the small groups reminded me that you guys have to come to my training. I'm doing a not so scary small groups. This is a free 4-part video series training that I'm doing, and it starts on Monday. I don't want you guys to miss it. You can go to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/training to sign up. Again, it's completely free, and for attending, you're going to get a free small group and a PD certificate of attendance. So if you liked, what I was talking about the small groups, and I'm giving you actual ideas of what you can do, and you're like, oh, I love that. On day 2 of the training, I do a deep dive on like actual activities and icebreakers and games you can use with your students. And I give you lots of examples, and they're just tangible takeaways that you can then use with your kiddos right away. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, if your ears perked up, you're going to love this. It's completely free, and it's stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/training. Okay, talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.